Hi, this is True Story with John Gibson. Today we have a really special guest. He is a NCAA champion, a member of the prestigious, or was a member of the prestigious wrestling club Foxcatcher, a Pride heavyweight tournament champion, a UFC heavyweight champion, multiple time ADCC champion, none other than the Smashing Machine himself, Mark Kerr.
Hey, thanks, John. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Completely my pleasure. With all that, with that grandiose intro there, I think that it's completely fitting to kind of start with, here, you have a lot of exciting things going on, and all of a sudden I'm reading a headline about a month ago and it's like The Rock to play Mark Kerr
I
in an upcoming
know.
feature film.
Yeah,
So can you share a
yeah,
little bit about how this is coming to fruition?
yeah.
It's so exciting.
You know what? It's one of those where obviously you're in the you have the mechanism to report on our industry and report on a lot of different things, right? Your storytelling, right?
Mhm.
And so I really hadn't been out in any kind of format or anything like that. And I get a stray call from a guy that says he is Dwayne Johnson's agent, a guy named Brad Slater, who
Mhm.
works for WMA, which is William Morrison Agency. And the
Mhm.
ironic part is Endeavor, right, is the
Right.
one that group bought the UFC,
Yeah,
which is
cool.
the like really the ironic part about it.
Mhm.
So I get a call, and I've had these calls before and don't really have, like going, okay, yeah, whatever. Yeah, like, okay, you're, the Rock's agent. That's great. Like having this really cynical perspective.
Mm.
And so I look him up online. I'm like, oh shit, like he's like he
This
is
is
the
the
Rock's
guy.
agent. So he tells me this story, and it was really good because so he says, hey, listen, DJ woke up in the middle of the night, and he's calls me, wakes up Brad, and says, hey, listen, I have an idea for the next project I want to do. And he goes, this is what I want to do. I want to do a story about Mark Kerr, and obviously I want to play him in a role. Now again, it goes to, I don't know exactly the content, meaning I don't know if he's going to start from when I was like 4,
Mhm.
wrestling and work its
Mhm.
way up, or concentrate on it. But you only have like 90 something minutes to hold somebody's
What a
attention in a
challenge.
movie
Yeah.
theater. Yeah. So anyway, Brad says, hey, listen, who owns your rights? And at the time, I ended up way back when I ended up selling my life rights, and I didn't understand that it's pretty complex what you can sell.
Mm.
You can sell like your movie rights, and you can sell like your book rights, and you can sell so many different aspects of who you are.
Mm.
And so he goes, do you know who's going to have them? And I'm like, I don't know. So I gave him a couple numbers, and he starts doing the legwork. And I honestly thought it would take, I thought it would take, oh gosh, like a year to
Mhm.
sort it out. And within like a couple of months, he calls me back, and he's like, hey, Brad calls me back, says, hey, listen, I think we got this thing nailed down. I'm sending the final paperwork out with the courier today. And I was okay, okay, like this is really
This
happening.
is happening. Yeah.
And sure
The
enough,
Rock owns
man,
my rights.
yeah, he owns my rights. He
Yeah.
owns my life story. He could do whatever he wants with it. The cool part is that the timing of it turned out really, really cool
Mm.
because so this would have been at the end of 2020. I always get time kind of messed up. So it would have
Yeah.
been the fall a couple of years ago,
Okay.
when he was at Madison Square Garden, and he had the
Yeah. Right.
BMF belt. And so he gets a hold, he like texts me, and it's funny, I joke about this. Like he texts me that morning. So he texts me and says, hey, are you available? And it's like, yeah, I'll check my schedule and make sure I'm
Yeah.
available
Sure.
to you. So, anyways, he calls me. He calls me, and we had this great conversation. And he says, "Hey, listen, I'm going to make the announcement today. It's going to be to to your fan base, the people that follow the sport and industry will know exactly, who you are and, what you're about. And, he goes, you don't have to do anything. He goes, I'm going to do everything. And I go, okay. And we had this great conversation.
Yeah.
So, out of nowhere,
It's
completely
so
out of
exciting.
nowhere.
Yeah, totally exciting. And your life is such an amazing story to be told. And I'm so excited to hear the potential that there's going to be a second chapter maybe after the Smashing Machine, right?
Yeah. It's the cool part is that it's just it's something that's completely unexpected, and for anybody in the world, if you're going to pick somebody, you have somebody ideally, like who would you want to play you, right? If you're
Right.
going to have a movie,
Oh, of course. Yeah.
it's like
What a
it just
huge honor.
happens. It just happens to be the guy that's got what 200-300 million
Right.
followers on social media, and is the top. I don't even know what you would call him, because it's just limiting to call him like an actor or a performer.
Right. I agree.
He encompasses so many different things right now. So just really incredible.
Yeah, what a tremendous honor, Yeah, what a tremendous honor. And switching gears a little, kind of about that, kind of the sort of the Smashing Machine, and not so much about the documentary itself, but I recently, in kind of in preparation, but not so much preparation, I rewatched it. And my wife is a documentary filmmaker, and she is not an MMA fan. She could barely make it through a BJJ match, and I encouraged her to watch it with me because I knew she'd appreciate the documentary. And for the first time ever, I watched it with a different perception and a different perspective. And maybe it's because I'm older and a father and stuff, but I really wanted to ask you, what was some of the, for better or worse, the impact of that documentary on your life afterwards? I mean, I know you had your mother, or excuse me, not your mother, but your sister was in it. Your father was in it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was more than just the fighting. This was very real. And so, I'm watching it and I was just fascinated thinking for the first time about that, so can you talk a little bit about that impact?
This is a sneaky part about addiction in general, right? Is that, a lot of my family didn't have, and they knew what I was doing. They knew I was fighting, but they didn't know the other side of it. They didn't know that I was in a slow spiral down to where I ended up. And I think a lot of, obviously it's something that, as an addict, as a recovering, alcoholic and addict and stuff like that, it's something that you become very crafty at hiding it. And I was trying to hide it from the film crew, and I was trying to hide it from my family. And, you're like, you're the last person on the block to realize that you can't hide that. I mean, it's like so apparent to everybody around you that, that you're off track, and you're so far off track, and, you're the last one to kind of get there and go, oh shit, man, my life's it's a train wreck. Even though I have a lot of the things that I, set as goals and, accomplishments and stuff like that, it's like, my life's it's just in a train wreck, and, so a lot of it was surprising to my family. I have a, really close relationship. One of my brothers wasn't in there, my older brother. And, for him, he's gone through his own trials, and, he knows that, the only way that you recover from addiction is, it's one of the few diseases that are self-diagnosed. It's like you have to come to the conclusion that, you have a problem. Somebody can't just tell you. I can't just go, hey, John, you got a problem. It's like you need to come to that conclusion yourself. And so once I was there, and obviously it didn't take, that much discovery, it's like you overdose and almost die. It's like, if that doesn't wake you up, something's wrong, so, it ended up being, one of those enlightening. It brought me closer together with my brother,
Mm.
And my other brothers, they experienced the beginning when I first started fighting. Like I flew, my brother, his wife, my other brother, I flew him over to Japan, and I had,
Mhm.
a gal I was engaged to. I mean, it was
Mhm.
like my whole family was included in that.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
the part where, it brought them closer. It's like, hey, listen, here's what's going on with me. Here's what I'm going to try to do.
Yeah.
And so it was definitely a family experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I'd really wondered
Yeah.
about some of that impact. And, I want to kind of switch gears to kind of some of the highlight stuff too, because, again, it's crazy because you were put in a time kind of pre-internet, early internet. That documentary takes the world by storm, and it only caught you in this glimpse of your life. And you had
Yeah.
accomplished
Yeah.
so much on this side and on this side that I hate for you ever to be defined by that moment in your life, and I think it's just amazing as somebody who the things that you accomplished before that we forget about, and they're worth highlighting and discussing. Very few people are NCAA champions and can hang
Mm.
at Syracuse, and can
Yeah.
hang in
Yeah.
Oklahoma in these programs,
Yeah.
and then go on to Foxcatcher and have the kind of the
Hmm.
Olympic ladder and these things. So can you share a little bit about that experience,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
pre-internet?
Part of how I grew up, where I grew up is, if you had the ability, you're looking for a vehicle to get you kind of out.
Mm,
Um, of there's not, again, there's nothing wrong with growing up in Toledo, Ohio. It's a fantastic place to grow up. Just
mhm,
for what I was trying to aspire to, it had very limited opportunities. I thought it did.
mhm,
And so, my whole thing was like, okay, how do I get to the next level? and
mhm.
and that was wrestling. And at my high school, the high school's been there for, gosh, man, like 100 years, coming up on, I think, 100 years. And I'm still the only state champion for AAA, which is the biggest division, out of my high school
Wow.
in 100 years. So,
Wow.
it wasn't a wrestling powerhouse.
Right,
It was one
exactly.
of those
Yeah.
things where, I ended up winning a state championship, which nobody's been able to do. And there's been a lot of really good wrestlers that have come through the program and stuff like
Mhm.
that. So that was the first part. And the second part was, to get a scholarship. And it just happens that
Yeah.
the World Cup of Wrestlings were held in Toledo, Ohio, and the assistant wrestling coach from Syracuse was participating in them. He came to my high school and talked. We had
Mhm,
met. He invited me to a wrestling camp and saw
mhm.
me wrestle and just started recruiting me.
Cool.
And
Yeah.
it's how I ended up at Syracuse. So,
Mhm.
coincidentally, good luck. And, it took me, I joke and I say it took me to my senior year to win an NCAA championship. But, I'd rather have won
Uh,
one than
sure.
been, like a three-time All-American or four-time All-American. It just, it took what it took. And,
Yeah. You were a
as it,
slightly later bloomer, but man, you were like
yeah,
at the world level, you were a powerhouse. You ran through Kurt Angle, you ran through Randy Couture. I mean, even in the head-to-head battles you had with Angle, there were so many other guys on the. I mean, you won.
yeah,
You won. You
yeah,
ultimately beat these guys. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it just so happens that the way it was set up back east, the predominant wrestling clubs back east, the number one wrestling club was Foxcatcher.
Hmm.
So after college, you tried to get with um, Foxcatcher, and it was difficult to get accepted into that club
Oh,
just
I bet.
because it had a very high prestige. They paid their athletes
Right.
well for wrestlers.
Hmm.
Um, and it ends up being a situation where my coach at the time in college was a guy named Chris Campbell.
Mm.
And Chris Campbell was good friends with Dave Schultz. And
Hmm.
Dave Schultz was the coach at Foxcatcher. So what my coach said, Chris Campbell said, hey, listen, I can only take you so far. And in order for you to get to the next level, you're going to need influences from other coaches. And he
Hmm.
goes, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to set up for you to go down to Team Foxcatcher and start training down there. And so I started going down. From Syracuse, it's like a 4-hour drive.
Okay.
So I'd go down there and I train over weekends, or I train during the week. And so I started building this relationship with Dave Schultz. And Dave was like, because I'm still only like a 23-year-old kid, and I was like, hey, can like put the good word in, and it's all this other stuff. And then so in the 1993 freestyle nationals, I ended up taking 4th place. And then in the 93 world team trials, I ended up winning the world team trials.
Right.
And I beat Kurt Angle, I beat Kurt Trost, I beat a guy named John Llewellyn, who had beat me twice in the nationals. All these guys. And literally after I took 4th at nationals, I'm like, I'm better than this.
Yeah.
And so I just trained my ass off. And once I won the world team trials and made it to the 93 worlds, that's when Fox Fetcher was like, okay, you're obviously good enough to be one of us. And they ended up bringing me on.
Now, did you win the FILA again after that, right after that as well?
So the way it worked out was so I placed 5th in the worlds, which were in Toronto, which were my first worlds. And the way that the world team trials work out is the world team trials, the number 1 ranked wrestler gets first choice for world competitions and all that for that calendar year.
Okay.
So I ended up wrestling in the 94 World Cups. I ended up winning the 94 World Cups. I ended up winning the 94 Freestyle Nationals. I ended up winning. So I go on a roll until I get to the Worlds in 1994, and I blow my ACL out. First match, first round, first 30 seconds. And those were in Istanbul, Turkey.
Wow. Unbelievable. And Turkey, too. It's the greatest wrestling.
Gosh, man, it was the guy who I ended up losing to. I ended up finishing the match because I remember going to the trainer saying, my knee's screwed. Can I injure it worse? And he just kind of looked at me and was like, no. And so I was like, okay. I went out and finished the match, and I get back to the States. They do an MRI. They look, my ACL's just shredded, and it's just that was an interesting year. That whole year leading up till me wrestling Kurt Angle again, and stuff like that. So
it was amazing. Your wrestling career was stories. So I guess ultimately your first transition into MMA, was that the No Holds Barred tournament in Brazil?
Yeah.
Wow. So you jumped right in the deep end.
Oh gosh, that's a deep end. Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
And it's just one where it's funny because the guy that trained me was a guy named Richard Hamilton.
Okay.
And Richard Hamilton just happened to have a dojo at the place that we were training for the 96 Olympics. So he had a place here in Phoenix at a place called the North Phoenix Baptist Church. And he had a little dojo, and he kept watching us wrestlers, and he would approach us wrestlers and say, hey, listen, if you don't make the Olympic team, I can get you into this fighting stuff. And most of us at the time were just thinking he was just like this creepy dude, like, hey, leave us alone. We want nothing to do with you. And so after Mark Coleman didn't make it, I didn't make it. Mark Coleman was the first one that took the jump, and he went first. And then I went right after him. So he didn't explain it like watching UFC, they had gloves on. They had somewhat kind of rules. So when I went down to Brazil, it was like, you're allowed to have tape up to your thumb. Yeah. And that was it. You weren't allowed to wear gloves. And they were like, basically, don't bite. And that was it.
Yeah. And talk about a hostile crowd. Like,
brutal.
Man, like that would have been as equally as terrifying. What if I win? Brutal. Will I make it back there? Yeah.
And the part about it, there was no, I can laugh about it now, but at the time it was like absolutely serious. It was serious because in the back, all I had, my locker room was like 2 partitions. It was like 2 6-foot movable partitions. So there was no hey, I feel threatened, go lock yourself in the locker room. There was no locker room, no nothing. And I don't think it's on film, but I remember I stayed in the ring after I beat Fabio. I stayed in the ring for probably 30 minutes.
Wow.
Waiting for the majority of people in the arena. It's not even an arena, it was like a conference room, waiting for them to clear out.
Wow.
Because there was like no way I'm getting out of the ring, and I'm walking, because I was with like two Americans.
Yeah.
And it was like, what? I mean,
yeah.
honestly, what would I do?
Yeah.
There'd be absolutely nothing.
Yeah, absolutely nothing.
So,
and you're tired and you're fatigued and your adrenaline's
exhausted,
escaping you. Oh my God. You're so brave, Mark. You're
Yeah.
so brave. I'm telling, for a guy who calls himself a non-fighter, it's like you
right.
could not have jumped in more of a terrifying situation. And that's the image that people conjured up of these early cage fightings. But
oh yeah.
It's amazing how far you did see that evolution, though, because ultimately, kind of toward, I'll just say maybe the tail end of Pride, you got to see an entirely different thing, man. You were selling out arenas or helping to sell out arenas. And the show was spectacular. I mean, I never personally witnessed it, but as a fan, I daydream. I just watched those videos.
It's as far as an environment, and the part about it, and it's not saying anything against American fans. Like, American MMA fans now are some of the most educated fight fans in the world, because there's been so much content over the last like 10, 15 years. So a Japanese fight fan had the ability to follow fighters for a lot longer before the American fans. And so Japanese fight fans were very educated, and it was kind of it was a really cool environment to fight in, because they cheered when there was like something to cheer about. They didn't yell and scream the whole time during a fight. They literally sat quietly, watched the fight, for an arena that was packed with people. The energy was fantastic. I mean, amazing. And you could still hear your coach. He didn't have to yell and scream. Like Boss Root, when he was in my corner, he could just say whatever he wanted to say. I could pick it up without any concentration at all. It was amazing.
Do you have a special memory or fight or anything specific around maybe Pride that just sort of you like to think about and revisit?
One of the coolest moments, and I'm going to strain to remember, I think it's going to be against Hugo Duarte, which was at the Tokyo Dome, and it was sold out. Wow. So there probably was like 60, I'm going to say there were 60 plus thousand people there. And prior to me walking out to the ring, they had these huge drums,
right,
that were on the stage, and they had these guys with these sticks, these wooden sticks, and they were beating on the drums. And I'll never forget this. The feeling, it was such an incredible feeling, because the feeling you can feel the vibrations of the drums, and you're just getting ready to open a curtain, and they're talking to you. Like, I got a gal standing behind me just going, okay, get ready. And you can feel the drums, you can feel all the anticipation. And part of that feeling is you almost feel like you have like Spider-Man senses. You feel them, you can smell, at a level which is incredible. You just feel this
hyper alert.
Hyper alert, right? And the feeling of that anticipation is just, it's incredible. And walking down, I remember the spotlight's on you, so you can barely see the fans, and you're walking down this walkway, which is elevated above the fans, and then you get almost to the ring, and then the spotlights click off, and then all of a sudden everything comes into view, where you can just see this whole entire sea of people, from floor to ceiling. And it's just this incredible feeling. It's part of the reason why, a lot of people fight, because not only the competition, what you can do
Mhm.
financially, just there's nothing else you do in everyday life that replicates that.
Yeah, I mean, there couldn't be. I can only imagine. You know, you've lived such a unique, you and other fighters, right, of that level, of that's such a unique
Oh
experience.
gosh, man, it's such a shared experience because like some of the other fighters, when you talk to them, there's nobody on the planet that gets that.
Sure.
There just isn't, and there's no way they can.
Yeah.
And even when I talk with, so a lot of times I'll talk with just a high school guy that was like really good in high school, or even a college athlete, and they talk about a moment like I just talked about, and they'll they it it's incredible because you can take yourself back there and you can
Hmm.
get this feeling, and me talking to a person going, hey, I know I was in high school, but it's that feeling that
Sure.
that you that you're looking for, or
Hmm.
whatever the commonality is. But
Yeah.
it's incredible.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's part of the reason why we do these things, and yeah. And as competitors in any sport or whatever you choose, you deserve it. You deserve it, because to be the best at anything, I know it sounds cliche, but you have to sacrifice. You have to give so
Oh
much of
gosh,
your life
it's
and your body and these things. And yeah, it's amazing. So I guess maybe, yeah, switching gears, I know that you're an awesome dad, man, and like your son's a great athlete too and all. So would you encourage him to like potentially be a professional athlete one day? I mean, I feel like your
he's
influence would be great.
expressed interest from a young age in being a MMA fighter. And
Wow.
I told him, I said, it doesn't matter what it is. Um, if you wanted to play badminton competitively, I would support it.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where I haven't pushed him. I
Hmm.
grew up in an environment where, I had a mom that really pushed me hard to be the best I could be. And, it turns out where it's like if I won one championship, she would literally think like, oh, you won one, you probably could have won three,
Right.
knowing what you know now,
It's like it
and
kept raising the bar.
I needed
Yeah.
that. I needed to be pushed like that. I needed to
Yeah.
be pushed, to the point where, like my mentor, Chris Campbell, he was 14 years older than me, and he knew, he knew how hard you have to work and
Hmm.
sacrifice to get to the level that, his favorite saying to me was, only if you could see yourself through my eyes, then you'd know what I'm talking about. Because he could see like the talent that I had. He could see the potential to be, multiple time, champion in whatever endeavor I chose. And
Right.
he would just literally, he would push me and push me and push me and push me.
Hmm.
And, when I won an NCAA championship, that was the first time that I truly understood the level of sacrifice
Yeah.
that you have to make, and
Hmm.
it's with every aspect of it. It's from food to friends to girlfriends to
Hmm.
all these different components that if one of them's out of line, you might not make it.
Yeah, sure. You know,
It's
you
amazing.
you said something really really prophetic right there. It was really awesome. But and I think you proved that to me in one instance, in that when you just I don't know when you decided, if that's fair to say, for me to say, but when you started competing in submission grappling and ADCC,
Hmm.
that was again kind of early internet, but it was easier to follow you at that time. And again, I was a fan,
Yeah.
so I was really invested in your success. So I followed and I followed. And at that time, the consensus amongst the world, and especially the fighting community, was that like jujitsu was probably going to beat all. It was still had the edge. And you, as an American and an American wrestler, were dominating, and you steamrolled these
Yeah.
guys, and
Yeah.
you were so, but it showed a level of intelligence that it wasn't that you steamrolled them. I'm being kind of funny there, but you were extremely smart, and yeah, you had the athleticism and all those intangibles. But jujitsu is more than that. You can't just smash somebody and win, and you're a multiple time ADCC champ. I mean, you're so cerebral. How did you? Was it just because you were learned from your mentors, like if I if I focus on this, give it my all? or was that something that was natural because of your wrestling base? I mean, how did you get so good so quick?
Think so. I think some of it obviously would come with just a natural instinct that would come with wrestling. Your ability to be able to figure things out, body wise, like body sense, body awareness, all these different things that you need to be successful in jiu-jitsu and wrestling. And then the other part was, and this is just being the first year, it was so relatively new, submission grappling, especially when you had the level of competition. I mean, you had guys that were Pan American champs in jiu-jitsu. You had all these different levels of competitors, that the one thing that was like so important was, how do you win? It was like, obviously we know how to win, you submit somebody. Other than that, how do you win? Right? I don't think I've ever listened to something as attentively or asked questions after the fact as through the rules meeting of like, how do you score? Yeah, like how do you score? How do you stop somebody from scoring? That I didn't know. It's like, oh my God, man! You better know the rules of the game if you're playing. And that was kind of like my mindset of like, I don't know the rules. I better be crystal clear on what scores, what doesn't score, when this, when that. And it was one of those things that I just distinctly remember of like, that was where all my attention was driven at my first ADCC championship, because it was like, how do you win? I know how to submit somebody, but how do you win? And that was the majority of my focus.
The strategy paid off. And it's so funny. It sounds so simple now, but like that was genius.
Oh gosh, man, it was, because part of the, like if you're training, you can train reaction. You can train reaction into something. Like you can you can parry your, punch, and you can duck and weave and roll and do all this stuff. But to try to implement something like that into like on the fly, basically, like, okay, I got all these rules stored in my head. How do I apply them to make my body react to them in real time?
Right.
Because if I'm truly thinking about it, I'm probably half a second too late. Right. So I need to try to get my mind to get with my body to make it all happen, just streaming, just totally without thinking. And that was the trick of like, okay, I'm going to just concentrate on this to try to, and you draw a mental map in your head. And, I do a bunch of different stuff when I'm competing to try to make that, like that gap, like non-existent between a thought and a reaction.
Right. Yeah, I love it. I mean, this is the inside of a champion, and it's really, I love it. It's a playbook, and you wanted to drill these things so you wouldn't have to think action, reaction, and shortcut. Yeah, exactly. I love it. Do you feel like you and maybe Coleman were like a really good drill partners or partners for that, because you both have
yeah. There's, Mark is so, I've known Mark now since 1987.
Wow.
So I've known him for a lot of years.
Yeah,
man.
25 years.
A lot of years. And yeah, he's been the same person. He's become a lot more talkative. Before it was like you can't get 2 words out of him, like literally. So the one thing about him that, he's a champion, all this other stuff that people, he outworked everybody because he was short, and he'll admit this, he was short on the talent department. He wasn't the most athletically gifted, athlete.
He says that. I wish I could have seen it because his record doesn't prove. Yeah, go on. Yeah,
it doesn't. Like Coleman, he like him and I, like Joel Gold just posted footage of him and I playing tennis, right? Like we're these two big blockheads, on a private tennis court at a tennis club.
Yeah.
I'm in spandex with no shirt on,
Yeah.
and we're playing freaking tennis. So it doesn't matter if we're doing that. He wants to win.
Yes.
He wants to win. And so his desire to win compensates for his lack of ability in some areas. So he had a rule that he was just going to outwork you. It didn't matter. He was just going to, he knew that in every situation, he wasn't going to be the most talented, but he wasn't going to be the guy that didn't put the work in.
Right. Wow.
And so he worked. So with him being a training partner of mine, he didn't accept like any bullshit during the training. So it'd be like, hey, I'm good, man. I don't need to do a 20th set. He'd be like, yeah, you do. Come on. And you go, just come on. Come on. And you weren't going to say no to it because he was telling you that was just like a little challenge of like, no, come on. And you just be like, oh, you mother.
Of course.
And you would just go do it.
Right. But steel sharpens steel, and how amazing that you two were able to find each other again and stay in, parallel to each other's lives, throughout.
Oh yeah. There's so many. And he, like most fighters, it's just kind of interesting because tonight I'm doing Jay Glazer has a charity, and part of the charity, and it's called MVP, and it's an acronym for, now I'm going to blank on it. I'm going to have to call you back
and
give you what it is.
Yeah.
So anyways, I'm going to name drop here, which is, I don't do this. So Hoist Gracie called me last week and said, hey, Jay has his charity, and he goes, I think you'd be really, really good fit for it. And I'm like, okay, what is it? He goes, I'm going to send you the information. So he sends me the information, and I call him back and say, oh, this is perfect. And the charity is a group of men that get together to help other men transition out of like active military. If you're active combat veteran, that experience of being a combat veteran, you usually have a harder time assimilating in everyday life because you're used to that combat, you're used to those adrenaline dumps and that high and stuff. Same thing with fighters. Same thing with me going in an arena, feeling the excitement, feeling all the different stuff that I felt being in a huge arena. How do I transition into going to work every day, sit behind a desk or making phone calls or whatever it is?
Right.
So Jay's created a support group for active military guys and for athletes that are ending their career, and he's putting the two together.
Awesome.
So it's this really good group of guys.
What a great cause.
Oh gosh, man, it's the perfect, it's peanut butter and jelly. It's the two things of like, so me bringing this up is saying that Mark, even though our careers parallel each other, he hung on to fighting a lot longer because that transition into everyday life is just a scary thing. It's for a lot of athletes, it's like, what? Well, if I'm not a fighter, then what am I?
Yes. Yeah.
Or where do I go? Or
it's an identity for sure. And especially fighting. I think just it's more than football. It's more than wrestling. It's more than BJJ because the sacrifice is higher and the risk is higher. And so it's like those things stay with you longer. Physically, the damage, all these things are going to be with you longer, the repercussions. So it's just so personal. Like I understand, I hold fighters in such admiration because I knew I didn't have what it take to do it. That wasn't for me. I could be a fan, I could do BJJ, I could wrestle, but that wasn't for me. So for those who chose to do it, man, I hold them in such high regard because,
it's very personal.
Yes.
And especially when you get to a very high level of competition, man, it is very revealing. It's very revealing. And part of like, I would joke about it. It's not this harsh, but it's like almost like, talking about fighting sometimes like talking about masturbation. It's like, it's a very personal thing.
Yeah.
It's like, it just is. And, it lays everything bare. It
Yes.
lays whether or
Yes.
not you had a training camp, whether or not you get winded, whether or not you get gas,
Yes.
what kind of character you are,
Yeah.
what kind of character you have,
Sure.
what kind of heart you have, all these
Yeah.
different things. And so
And
when you
sometimes
when
you
you
just
come,
meet a hammer, you know? Sometimes
yes,
you did do all the right things, and it's really hard to reconcile the fact that you had a team of coaches or a partner at home
yep,
that loved you and made that meal and helped you get to bed early and those things. And
oh
sometimes you
yeah,
just come up short and you get,
yep,
man, that's hard.
oh it's brutal,
Yeah.
it's brutal, and part of understanding all of that is when you come to an end, there isn't like a transition group
Right.
that go,
Right.
okay, hey Mark, you know what, you're winding down fighting next month, you're retiring. It's like,
Hmm.
let's see what the next chapter is. And
Right.
for me personally, it was very difficult, and I still work on it every day.
Mm.
And so part of what Jay Glazer is trying to stop is
Mhm.
that when you have that transition and you have trouble doing it, the answers that a lot of guys have are drugs, alcohol,
Right. Sure.
suicide,
Sure.
the things that because they don't know how to assimilate, they don't know how to
Hmm.
transition from the next part. And
Right.
so to get those feelings that are so uncomfortable is
Yeah.
like, man, I need to stuff them, or I need to bury them. It's like, let me get
Yes.
some beer, let me get alcohol,
Yeah,
let me
of
get drunk,
course.
or
It's
let me
so
just end it.
important. And what I'm so it's so great that you're taking part in this to be able to offer that mentorship because you
Oh,
lived it and you can help others potentially avoid that. And there's PTSD. I know it's the elephant in the room,
yeah,
but I've
yeah,
dedicated my life. I'm a mental health advocate. I've dedicated my life to helping people with PTSD. And for fighters, for soldiers, for people that have had just trauma, they carry that for the rest of their lives. And it does change you, but it doesn't have to change you totally for the worse. And to heal, it takes mentorship, it takes other people, it takes human experiences and compassion and empathy, and it's true. So what you're doing is just as manly and important
yeah, yeah,
than anything you've ever
yeah.
done.
Oh God, man, it takes more nuts. It really does, to do this side of it than the other side.
Wow.
The other side I can train for, right? I can go to the gym, I can work out, I can do that. It's like, where do you train to be like mentally fit?
Yeah.
It's like, where do I where do I go to that gym? They don't
Yeah.
have that gym. It's not the strip mall. They don't have like mental fitness.
No.
It's like,
Yeah.
so,
And we don't talk about this
emotional
stuff a lot of
emotional
times.
health. It's like, where's
Yeah.
that gym? Let's go
Yeah.
to the emotional health gym. It's
Yeah.
like, so a lot of these subjects people don't want to talk about, and they're
Mhm.
probably more relevant now, especially, me being in recovery, and, the isolation that this COVID crap caused,
Yes.
and the sense of disconnection, and
Yes.
the breaking a routine, and the, all the stuff that I dealt with at the beginning of this. It was like, holy crap, man, this is like really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard for me, and I've experienced doing it. I
Yeah.
can't imagine that somebody's, new to recovery, or new to sobriety, or just, getting back, emotional, and the amount of, just the amount of anguish that this caused. It
Yeah.
just,
It's been very
it's
difficult.
unbelievable.
Yeah. It's been very difficult. And I think we all experience all of that. And you're right. It's good to
Yeah,
be empathetic to others. Like you said, you have some of the tools to be able to cope. I'm like you. I'm very empathetic to others. I just think that I focused on for my own good mostly, but for others too, is I just put truly something positive out every day. And most of the time it's
yeah,
something I need to
yeah,
hear, you know,
yeah,
but
right.
I just make it that practice. And when I do that 365, I'm like, at least I'm trying. And then it's the
Yeah,
intent that starts the day right.
yeah,
But it's hard.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's incredible, because this is, the industry. I look at it like, yeah, MMA has come such a long way. It's incredible the amount of growth it's had in the last, 20 years.
Sure.
The part about it that sometimes is hard for me to look at is the infrastructure around it hasn't grown up around it. Because you have the industry, and the industry is the industry, and then you have all of the participants in it that don't have the whole support system underneath it.
Sure.
And so that's the aspect of it. Like, if, people say, oh, what, if you could do anything, what would you do? I'd probably come up with an organization that helps with the transition of MMA fighters into everyday life.
Yeah.
The top level, even though it's a small group, it's still, you have, thousands of kids and thousands of people now that are trying to make this their career.
Right.
So it's been interesting. It's been interesting, to say the least.
Yeah. And it's time, that first generation of fighters, they've retired. You were part of that, in my opinion, that first real wave, and the second generation's probably retired now too.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of unpopular in the MMA community because last week I went on a tangent because I said there should be ways for these folks to exploit their likeness afterwards, after fighting. And they should be able to, monetize these things, and everybody came hard at me.
I agree.
But they should, for what you sacrifice.
Yeah.
If I want to watch a Mark Kerr fight right now on Fight Pass or something, I feel like you should be compensated,
Yep.
So
I agree.
But we're to play devil's advocate, the UFC's growing, and the ownership's been there 25 years or so, but it's time to start. I understand why they didn't self-impose these things early, but now it's time to start having those discussions. And in my opinion, for whatever that's worth,
No, John, I agree. And it's one of those, like, I haven't looked at a UFC contract in years, but the UFC contracts, even the ones I signed back then, were pretty inclusionary. They just covered everything. They covered future stuff that wasn't even invented, and that was kind of how the contracts are written. I understand a business is a business,
right?
But if you treat your employees like disposable razors, and I got an issue with it.
Yeah.
I really do. And I can get into a huge tangent about it, but it's just one where it's like the industry, I don't know what the ledger says, but it looks like from an outsider's perspective that they're making money, and they're making enough money where they should be able to participate in some kind of sharing with. I would look at it like, if my employees didn't have, good mental, emotional health, or retirement, or healthcare, or all this stuff, I would figure out a way to work with them to get something done, which helps stabilize that community. But that's me.
Sure. Well, look, hey, there's always tomorrow.
And we have a little bit more time.
No, I know. And I know. I want to be careful as not to go there too. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm all about keeping things positive, but I agree. And I'm with you. And anything to support a fighter, I'm going to agree, at the end of the day, like, I'm a fight fan. I'm a fan of a lot of things. I'm a BJJ fan. I'm a fight fan. I'm a wrestling fan. I'm a family man, I'm a fan of good families, whatever. But I want what's equal and equitable for all. And whatever that means, but kind of like, I know we went way over time a while ago, and I do appreciate that. One kind of last thing to kind of ask, is there any maybe like words of advice or kind of final thoughts you'd like to kind of just leave everyone with? I mean, again, we barely scratched the surface, Mark. You've had such an amazing life.
Wow. The saying that I used to have, and sometimes it's hard to abide by it. It was above my door from last couple of years in college. It was just make the most of today. You can never get the day back. And it just was one, like, along your line of thought, is just, impact the world in a positive way, even if it's only one thing. And I look at it like this, like, some days I can't figure it out. I can't figure out how to give that little positive thing back. but it ends up turning into something where, like, when I was a Cub Scout or a Boy Scout, you had a little Bobcat pin, and if you did a good deed for the day, you turn your Bobcat pin from upside down to right side up. And so sometimes it's as simple as, letting a car in traffic, holding the door open for somebody. It doesn't have to be this huge grand idea of like, we're going to create a movement.
Right.
It's just a small little thing, and it's called the ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
So I do that small little thing for that person. That person I didn't know was having a horrible day. And by doing that little tiny thing, I just made their day a little bit better. So the next person they encounter, they're going to do that little thing that makes their world better. And they're going to do that little thing that's going to make, I know it's grandiose thinking, idealized thinking, but it's just one where it's like, if we could just do that little thing, if each one of us could just do that little thing, it creates that little ripple effect. And that ripple effect, on days when I'm just not able, emotionally, mentally, and, all these different things to do anything other than just that small little thing, then I had a successful day.
It's so inspiring.
It doesn't have to be these grandiose ideas,
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's so inspiring. And you made my day. So you did it. You checked that box. This is True Story again today with John Gibson and Mark Kerr. Thank you so much again, Mark, for joining me.
Oh gosh, man, thanks for having me, and we'll have to do this again soon.
Yeah, anytime. My pleasure.
All right, you got it, John. I'll talk to you soon, bud.
Take care.